I never imagined failing every exam until a black janitor taught me the life-changing secret. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. The hallway echoed with whispers, laughter, and my own shattering heart. I had always been the smart kid, the one teachers praised, but here I was, clutching a report card that felt like a death sentence. FS and everything. I didn't cry. My chest was too tight for that, but I wanted to. The air felt heavy, and all I could hear was the pounding of my heart, like a warning drum. His name was Mr. Bennett. Everyone called him the janitor. He pushed a mop across the floor, a thin man with deep lines etched on his face, like a roadmap of struggle and wisdom. I felt strange watching him. He moved with a calmness that felt alien in that chaos. I was buried in my thoughts, trying to understand how I had failed so miserably when he looked up, his brown eyes locking onto mine. It startled me. It was like he could see the unbearable weight on my shoulders. "Hey, kid," he said, his voice slow and deliberate. "You look like the world just punched you in the gut." I didn't respond. I would have preferred the punch to the sinking feeling. I wanted to disappear. But there was something in the way he stood, steady and firm, that pulled me in. Maybe it was the way he didn't flinch, even when I did. That he told me stories while he mopped. Stories about struggle, about giants and dreams. His words had a warmth to them, a hint of something I desperately needed. I listened, captivated and confused. How could this man, who pushed a mop for a living, understand the crushing weight of my fears? I could sense the pain behind his stories, the way he spoke of lost opportunities and stolen dreams. He had lived through storms I couldn't even imagine. One afternoon, he dropped the mop, and silence fell. "It ain't about your grades," he said fiercely, eyes blazing. "It's about the fight in you. You gotta dig deep, find that spark, and let it burn." His hands shook slightly, a mix of passion and something I couldn't quite place. I wanted to believe him, needed to cling to the faint hope he was giving me. How could hope flourish in such dark soil? Then one day, he handed me a folded piece of paper. "Remember this," he said. "It's not the answers to your exams. It's the question. Find the right questions, kid." I stared at him, confused and intrigued. What did he mean? My gut twisted with uncertainty. I felt as though I was standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down while the winds of change howled around me. What questions could possibly lead me out of this darkness? The bell rang, jarring me back to reality. I rushed to class, tapping the paper nervously against my leg. What if I dug too deep? What if I found out I wasn't enough? The terror of failing again crept in, tight around my throat. My heart raced. Already my classmates were whispering and snickering about grades as I took my seat. But what Mr. Bennett said echoed in my mind, fueling an unexpected fire. That I glanced at the paper once more, desperate to understand. But before I could unravel its mystery, I caught sight of my teacher's disappointed expression. It was like she was judging me, weighing my worth against that glaring F. What if she understood? What if everyone learned about my secret? My stomach churned, and my hands trembled. But as the lesson began, I noticed I wasn't afraid of the answer anymore. I wanted to know the questions. What did this strange little piece of paper mean? I held it tight, feeling it burn against my palm. The moment felt alive, electric, full of impossible possibilities. Could Mr. Bennett's secret really change everything? Would I dare trust it? As the clock ticked relentlessly, I sat there, heart racing and breaths quickening, on the edge of something much bigger than myself. My eyes darted back to the paper. There was a mystery, a challenge waiting. But would I have the courage to face it? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them. Without warning, take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The following days blurred together in an awkward dance of hope and anxiety. I carried Mr. Bennett's folded paper with me everywhere, and it weighed heavier than my heavy backpack. Each crinkle of the paper felt like a whisper to my soul, urging me to search, to question. But still, I found myself slipping beneath the weight of uncertainty, struggling to breathe in the suffocating classroom atmosphere. As weeks passed, Each class felt like a courtroom, and I, the accused, sat shivering under the scrutinizing glares of teachers and peers alike. They harbored a silent understanding and anxious agreement rooted in comparison. I could almost hear their unspoken murmurs, questioning how someone once promising could become a vessel of failure. I watched as my classmates raised their hands, confident and eager, while I sat tightly wound like a spring, terrified that even the simplest answer would unleash a tidal wave of judgment. Then, one afternoon during lunch, a gentle hand slid a paper plate across the cluttered table. I glanced up to see Lily, someone I barely knew but often admired from a distance for her kindness towards everyone, even to the odd ones like me. "You look like you could use some food," she said softly, with a warm smile that felt like sunlight breaking through a dreary day. I stared at the slice of pizza and the careful arrangement of grapes beside it, humiliated but grateful. "Thanks," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. My heart tensed, and I withdrew, feeling undeserving of her kindness. She continued talking about irrelevant things, sharing bits of her life like they were the most precious gems. But all I could think about was my turmoil, the grades hanging like anchors around my neck. As lunch wrapped up, she looked at me, eyes steady and unyielding. "You know, people are more than their grades, right? Just keep trying. You'll find a way." For the first time, I felt like there might be a sliver of warmth in the shadowy realm I had inhabited since the report card. Hope flickered just as it threatened to extinguish. But as the end of the school week approached, the tension thickened once more. My teachers assigned a group project, and I was paired with Marcus, the unofficial king of mockery. The dread settled in my gut like a heavy stone. The last thing I wanted was for my inadequacies to become fodder for his laughter. That afternoon, I entered the library, my heart pounding in anticipation of his derision. To my surprise, he didn't mention my grades at all. Instead, he leaned back and began to share his perspective on the project rather thoughtfully, for someone I had written off as merely a bully. "I know this stuff can be boring," he muttered, scanning the pages of our textbook. "But we can make it work. Let's just aim to pass." I blinked at him, taken aback. What was happening? Why was he being nice? As we dug deeper into the project, I found moments of clarity that started to illuminate the fog in my mind. I asked questions, and to my astonishment, Marcus actually helped me formulate the right ones. Ideas began flowing. Discussions sparked like little fires, and I momentarily tasted that elusive excitement for learning that had once burned brightly within me. But with each step forward, the shadows whispered doubts, and my earlier courage was met with a wave of self-doubt. What if I didn't grasp the concepts after all? What if my contributions fell flat? What if we fail again? On the night of our presentation, as I stared into the bathroom mirror, my own reflection looked foreign. The anxious version of myself was attempting to hide behind a fragile mask of bravery. I thought of Mr. Bennett's words, that fight within me that seemed to wane rather than grow stronger with every failure. Still, I clutched that folded paper and steadied my breath. This was not just about grades. It was about the questions I was unearthing. With my heart racing at a rapid tempo, I stepped onto the stage in our classroom, Marcus standing at my side. But just as I began, the door swung open with such force that it startled everyone, including me. "Mr. Bennett?" Someone called out from the back. My heart dropped. There he stood, unexpected and imposing, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the tension in my chest. He entered, pausing to take in the room, before settling his gaze firmly on me, a smile dancing on his lips. The room felt heavy. He held a paper in his hand, and my world shifted as the realization dawned it was my name he was about to say. Would he bring all my failures into the light? What kind of life-changing secret was waiting in the shadows of that paper? My breath hitched, the rush of fear surged. This wasn't just a test about academics anymore. This was the very essence of who I was and who I had the potential to be. I didn't just need answers, I craved understanding. And as the air thickened with questions, I could almost hear the echoes of my heart daring me to embrace whatever truth lay ahead. The air in the room crackled with an electric tension as Mr. Bennett stepped forward, that folded paper still clutched tightly in his hand. My eyes darted from him to Marcus, who turned to me with a look that was difficult to interpret: concern, curiosity, even a hint of support. I felt unmoored, suspended between the present and the unknown. It was as if everything I had worked for was about to be laid bare, leaving me vulnerable. Mr. Bennett began, glancing at the audience before focusing on me again. I came to share something important with all of you. His voice was steady, but I could see that he was searching for the right words, as if he wanted to ease some looming burden off my shoulders, or perhaps off his. There was a soft rustle as classmates shifted in their seats, whispering to one another, their eyes flitting between Mr. Bennett and me. I clenched my fists, a tremor of panic sparking within me. My mind raced with possibilities. What was he about to say? Would he share my failures? Would they taste bitter in the mouths of my peers? And to do that, he'll need to take a step back, he continued, taking a deep breath. Before I became your teacher, I worked many jobs. One of them was as a janitor at a local high school. It wasn't glamorous, but it taught me some of life's most valuable lessons. He launched into a story about his experiences, many of which he shared with a sincerity that drew everyone's attention. I felt the warmth of curiosity ripple through the room, the laughter of a forgotten story, the touching anecdotes about students he admired but who were often invisible. I couldn't help but listen, my heart pounding a steady rhythm as he spoke of resilience and the strength needed to rise after falling. But my gaze drifted back to the paper in his hands, an unseen weight that felt heavier as he continued. The walls of the classroom faded, and I became painfully aware of my own insecurities echoing within my skull. I studied every tick of Mr. Bennett's face, each blink and smile, searching for a sign that he would connect what he had shared with me, that he would make the unspoken link between my struggle and his lessons. Then, as if reading my thoughts, he paused. You see, success isn't just the gleaming trophies or the A's on your report cards, he said, his eyes locking onto mine with a piercing clarity. It's about finding your own path and accepting where you are on that journey. Delve into curiosity over judgment. He shifted his stance, hand gripping the paper tightly. And I've seen a remarkable ability in a certain student that needs to be highlighted. That my heart leapt then plummeted, a sudden rush of vulnerability coursing through me. What was he doing? In that moment, I felt naked under his gaze and the weight of my peers' scrutiny. Any semblance of control I had over the room dissolved, and I wanted to shrink into the floor, to become invisible among the scattered words of hope he was presenting. Chloe, he finally announced. You are more than the grades you've received. You are capable of so much more. Gasps echoed through the room while I remained frozen, a deer caught in headlights. My pulse quickened, adrenaline surging through me as laughter erupted, hostile whispers floating through the air. I felt their disbelief washing over me like a chilling wave, making every muscle in my body tighten. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke through the chaos. What does a failing student even know about resilience? It's just ridiculous. It was Marcus, who, with the slightest inflection, belied disappointment, a little mocking that I couldn't decipher correctly. Anger flared within me, mixing uneasily with the fear still building up as Mr. Bennett turned to Marcus, an unwavering composure etched across his features. It's in the moments when we stumble that we often discover who we truly are, he said, his tone steady and firm. Everyone feels like failing sometimes, but not everyone has the courage to grow from it. The room fell into a peculiar stillness, eyes shifting between Mr. Bennett and Marcus. I stood there, caught in the crossfire of uncertainty and the rising tide of something I didn't quite recognize. Hope, shame, the desperate wish to break free from the chains of comparison. But before I could process it, the moment shattered with the sharp ringing of the bell, signaling the end of the period. I felt disoriented, caught in the tempest of truths, lies, and every unspoken thought hanging heavy in the air. I turned to leave. A voice called out a member of the audience, someone I didn't know. But what about the black janitor? What was his secret? The irreverent question hung in the air like a bitter fruit waiting to drop, and a chill swept through me. Bennett paused, a look of reckoning flashing across his face before an enigmatic glimmer settled in his eyes. Sometimes the answer to our greatest challenges lies not in textbooks, but in our own willingness to open our minds and hearts to those who offer us the simple truth. And just like that, he disappeared through the door, his last words reverberating like a distant bell, leaving me standing amidst a cascade of questions, a labyrinth of inquisition I longed to navigate, but feared to touch. In that moment, I felt the depth of the unraveling conflict within me intensify. What had I truly learned, and where would this path lead me? Would I have the strength to embrace the unknown? Anxiety knotted in my stomach, and as I stepped out into the hall, every familiar face around me transformed into figures of both memory and mystery, echoing the same plea ID carried with me all along. What came next? The echoes of Mr. Bennett's words dissolved into the walls of the school, yet the weight of them lingered far heavier than I anticipated. I walked through the bustling hallways, my head swirling with self-doubt and embarrassment. The murmurs of laughter faded, but the sting of Marcus's words remained sharp against the backdrop of my thoughts. A kaleidoscope of emotions swirled within me: vulnerability, anger, and an unshakable sense of inadequacy that I slipped into the bathroom, seeking a moment of solitude. The fluorescent lights above flickered, illuminating the cracked mirrors that reflected a version of myself I hardly recognized. My eyes were puffy, the remnants of unshed tears mingling with uncertainty. I leaned against the cold porcelain sink, taking a deep breath and squeezing my eyes shut, willing my mind to silence the chaos. Just breathe, Chloe, I whispered to myself like a bomb in the storm. But each inhale felt weighted, thickened by the vulnerability I felt so exposed to. I thought of Mr. Bennett's story, the way he weaved his hopes into the fabric of his failures. Resilience was spoken of as if it were a warm embrace, but mine felt like a shivering shadow, elusive, always just beyond my grasp. Moments later, I walked out, my body on autopilot, my heart still tangled in tumult. The familiar hustle of students zipping past me failed to pull me back into the present. I felt like a specter drifting through. The grip of my worries tightened, squeezing out the tiny shimmer of hope that had dared to surface. Could I really change? Or was I destined to be the failure everyone expected me to be? Finding solace seemed impossible, yet when I entered the library, a small light flickered. An old librarian stood near the desk. Her name tag read Ms. Harris. She glanced up, her gray hair framing a wise, kind smile. "Hello, dear," she said softly. "You look like you could use a friend." I stifled a laugh, unsure of how to respond. My friends were predominantly studying, struggling to find their own footing in the uncertainty of exams and expectations. I had thrown myself into this storm alone, hadn't I? "I'm okay. Just thinking," I replied, unsure whether the inhibition dancing along my tongue reflected a deceptive truth or a truth in disguise. "Thinking can be a double-edged sword," she replied wisely, "especially when you're not sure what you're prodding at. Sometimes, sharing those thoughts can lighten the weight." As she spoke, a flicker of warmth infused the air around us, the truth in her eyes urging me to explore my depths, to unearth what lay concealed beneath the layers of tension. "You mentioned resilience. Have you ever felt it? Even in moments when you thought you didn't have it?" I shook my head slowly, unsure of the answer. "Not really. I guess it's just something I haven't felt for a long time." I paused, my heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of my confession. "I'm always the one who falls, the one who struggles. It's easier that way, Dada. But you see, failure is but a chapter in your narrative, Chloe. It's a teacher that guides us, but certainly not the end of the story," she mused, her voice filled with soft conviction. Her words danced invitingly in the air, wrapping around me like a gentle caress, and for the first time that day, I allowed myself to think beyond my despair. "Can you tell me how you felt when you realized that? How did you find your way?" I found myself asking, the earnestness in my voice surprising even me. Ms. Harris looked contemplative, then shared a story of her own, a tale of her childhood, filled with clumsy attempts at painting, the splatters of paint often reflecting her moods and mishaps. "I wasn't always this passionate about books. I often failed at art. I used to think I'd never be good enough, but every failed canvas taught me a lesson, and soon I understood that beauty often lies in our missteps." Her storytelling slipped me into a space of yearning longing for that same beauty in my own mistakes. Yet, with every revelation, the shadow of doubt loomed larger. "But how do you free yourself from what others think?" I pressed, the fear nearly tangible in my words. "That be why embracing your own narrative, dear. Make it yours to mold, unafraid of the ink stains your journey leaves behind. You are the author of your own story, and it's time to believe in different possibilities," she said warmly, her deep eyes glinting with a passion that felt contagious. As I stepped outside the library, the weight on my shoulders had lightened, if only by a fraction. The conversations I'd had, every unexpected word laced with kindness, offered a glimmer in the shadowy crevice of my doubt. Just as I began to think that maybe, just maybe, I could carve out a path uniquely mine, the shriek of a fire alarm pierced the air, jolting the school into a frenzy. Panic erupted, students rushed towards the exits, but my feet felt glued to the ground. Chaos helped me focus, drawing me away from my self-doubt, urging me to act. I glanced around, assessing the situation. Then I saw her. Ella, my best friend, was standing still amidst the swarming crowd, panic etched across her face. Our eyes met, and in that split second, I felt the rawness of the earlier conversation, the chance to rally and be more than my fears. Instinctively, I reached for her hand, leading her toward the emergency exit where others were converging. "Chloe, we need to move," she shouted, but I shook my head and pulled her closer. "Just trust me," I urged, the fire alarm blaring a shrill reminder that the raging uncertainty didn't hold the capacity to dictate our fate. Yet, just as we reached the door, I turned back, searching for Marcus among the crowd, drawn by an inexplicable urge. Our gazes met briefly before he was swept away in the chaos, leaving behind an unresolved tension that echoed with unasked questions. The two of us stumbled out into the crisp air, but as I pulled Ella to safety, an unsettling thought wormed its way into my mind. With every challenge emerged my new desire to embrace resilience. But would addressing my fears bring unexpected connections or create walls that still separated me from Marcus and those I cared about? I was diving deeper into a labyrinth of self-discovery, and the bigger implications wrapped themselves around me, leaving me breathless at the threshold of understanding. The world outside felt starkly different from the clamor inside. The sun was bursting through the clouds, illuminating everything around me with a golden glow that felt almost surreal. Yet, amid the brightness, I felt an undercurrent of anxiety. The fire alarm was a catalyst, jolting life into a frenzied pace, yet it also detached me from the very thoughts that had begun to spin a web of hope within. As Ella and I stood outside, our breaths visible in the cool air, the reality of the moment washed over me. My heart raced, not just from the alarm, but from Marcus's fleeting gaze that lingered in my thoughts, the echo of my last conversation with him amplifying in the silence surrounding us. I couldn't fathom why his absence felt like a tangible loss, as if the rush of chaos had stolen a piece of what I had tried to build. "Are you okay?" Ella's voice was laced with that familiar concern. She was shaking slightly, and instinctively, I reached out to steady her. I began but struggled to form the words. The adrenaline from the panic morphed into a lingering unease as I battled the instinct to shrink back into self-doubt. From a distance, I spotted Ms. Harris, standing off to the side, her expression calm as she approached the disarray of students. I marveled at her composure amidst the swirling chaos. She caught my eye and offered me an encouraging nod. Perhaps I could lean into that wisdom. Perhaps I didn't have to bounce from one end of the emotional spectrum to another, feeling buoyant one moment only to sink back into despair the next. "Chloe, let's go over there," Ella suggested, gesturing toward a group of students huddled together, but her eyes were scanning for something more familiar, likely Marcus. He had slipped away, and for some reason, that bothered me more than I wanted to admit. "Wait. Just give me a second," I said abruptly, breaking from her grasp. The words tumbled out before I could think them through, but the need to anchor myself in this strange new ground compelled me to push through. Ella stepped back, concern knitting her brows together. "What are you doing?" she asked, the question imbued with confusion. "I just need to Chloe." A voice cut through the noise, and I turned to see Marcus pushing through the throng of people. His face was pale, stress etched across his features, and our eyes locked for what felt like an eternity. In that moment, the world around us became indistinct. It was just the two of us standing at the edge of an uncertain precipice. "Are you okay?" he shouted, and the weight of his words crashed over me like a wave breaking upon the shore. Desperate, urgent, and undeniably real. I mean, I will be," I replied, instinctively reaching for the truth in his gaze, desperate to unravel the complexities that danced between us. He nodded, but his brow furrowed deeper. I thought I lost you in there, he confessed, the intensity in his voice cutting through the swirling chaos surrounding us. The connection sparked something inside me, a tether I didn't know I craved. Just as I began to formulate a response, the fire alarm ceased its wailing, leaving behind a fog of uncertainty that lingered like smoke. Suddenly, the crowd surged again, sweeping us apart, and fear gripped my heart at the thought of losing that fleeting connection. Chloe. Ella's voice broke through my haze as she reached for me, but a wave of students pushed me away from her and closer to Marcus. My surroundings became a blur. The energy between us ignited an unspoken understanding. I took a step toward him, but before I could speak, a loud voice interrupted the ebb of our moment. Everyone, please remain calm. The drill is over. Head to your classrooms. A teacher waved frantically, and I could see authority figures trying to corral the chaos into semblance that I took a shaky breath, the air troubled with tumultuous emotions. I really need to find out what happens next, I said, allowing my gaze to drift toward the now distant crowd in search of Ella. Marcus nodded, though concern was still etched on his face. "I'll meet you after class?" he asked, hesitantly, hope flickering in his blue eyes. "Yeah, after class," I echoed, but there was a sense of unresolved tension hanging between us. As we exchanged one last glance, the moment felt like a precariously balanced teeter-totter. Yearning and fear danced together, the promise of hope tethered by uncertainty. And then he turned away, and with him, the tether that held my carefree thoughts and the shattering reality I struggled against began to fray. I felt as though I had tried to grasp hold of something beautiful that was already fading. Ella reappeared, pulling me back to the present, her face still twisted with unease. "Where did he go?" she asked, scanning the crowd. "You were just standing there." The words caught in my throat as I realized how profoundly I felt disoriented. The moment we shared loomed larger than the chaos fading around me, stoking internal embers of hope and fear as I tried to make sense of everything bubbling inside. "Let's just go inside," Ella suggested, decisively steering me toward the building. As we walked back, a wave of frustration washed over me. I wanted to scream that nothing made sense, that everything felt too real to ignore. And just as I was grappling with the need to express my confusion, a chilling sensation crept up my spine. From the corner of my eye, I spotted the janitor, the one I'd seen earlier, quietly holding a small envelope. As he glanced our way, I caught the glint of something shimmering in the sunlight, a glimmer of hope, or perhaps a warning. While the rest of the world rushed by, I felt a deep pull to him. And as the noise of the school faded behind me, I wondered what that envelope might contain. Would it offer another layer of truth, or would it unravel everything I thought I knew? In that moment, I was left teetering on the brink of revelation, a harsh reminder that the true weight of this journey lay ahead. My heartbeat quickened again as an unsettling thought crept into my mind. How much of my story was yet to unfold, and would I have the courage to embrace the unknown? The hallways echoed with the murmurs of students returning to their classrooms, laughter mingling with anxious whispers about the alarm's interruption. My heart still raced as I tried to process the mixture of relief and anxiety that twisted in my chest. I followed closely behind Ella, whose footsteps felt heavy with the burden of the moment. I could hardly focus on anything beyond the thrum of my pulse and the dark glimmer of the envelope still fresh in my mind. "Did you see Marcus?" Ella asked, glancing over her shoulder. The way she braced herself indicated she was waiting for reassurances, and at that moment, I didn't know if I could offer any. My own heart felt like a tightly wound spring, taut with unanswered questions and lingering emotions. I admitted, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "I thought we were. I thought I could say something." Ella nodded, her expression shadowed with sympathy. "You'll get another chance," she said, her voice softening. "Just breathe, Chloe." "Yeah, breathe," I murmured, though it felt impossible. The weight of unsaid things hung between us like a shroud, muting the excitement of being back at school an hour after chaos had swept us out. Only a few corridors lay between us and our class, but I felt as though we were miles away, trapped in an echo of that fleeting moment with Marcus. "Are you sure you're okay?" Ella pressed again, her eyes lingering on me, searching. I could sense her concern, but all I could offer was a distant smile. "I just need to think," I replied, the honesty surprising us both. But it was true. I needed to process everything: the fire alarm, Marcus, the stranger with the envelope who somehow felt pivotal to my burgeoning understanding of the world. We slipped into the familiar classroom, finding a routine already in motion. Students settled as the teacher droned on about the curriculum ahead, their faces a collage of anticipation mixed with fatigue. My mind wandered as Ella took notes, her pen dancing across the page, while my thoughts remained anchored elsewhere. As class dragged on, I couldn't shake the sense that something was about to change. My gaze drifted back toward the door, half expecting Marcus to appear, as if he could somehow mend the fraying threads of my emotions with a single smile. Then the classroom's atmosphere shifted. I overheard whispered conversations about the unexplained fire drill, speculation building into murmurs about grades and tests, about how easily everything could tumble out of control. "Don't worry." Ella's soft voice broke through my reverie, pulling me back into focus. "We'll get through it all. Maybe it was just a drill." But her comfort didn't quite pierce the anxiety pressing down on my chest. Instead, it only amplified the confusion that spread through me. If it were just a drill, why did it feel so significant? Why did that envelope in the janitor's hands, glowing with mystery, call to me like a lighthouse in a storm? As the bell rang, jolting me from my thoughts, Ella rose eagerly, her fingers coiling around the edge of her desk. "Let's find Marcus. He might be waiting outside," she exclaimed, her excitement bleeding into the atmosphere. "Okay," I agreed, though a deep-rooted uncertainty surfaced. I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever awaited me outside. The hope that had ignited during our brief moment pulled against the fear of losing it. The very idea of failing to bridge that connection sat heavy in my gut. Ella surged ahead as I trailed behind, my breath caught. Each step felt like a countdown to something inevitable, and the tension coiled tighter with every heartbeat. Outside, the sun was bright, but the shadows felt longer than they had before. Students milled about, laughter weaving a tapestry of vibrant life, but my eyes scanned the crowd for Marcus. I almost sensed him there, waiting. When I spotted him leaning against the wall, the world slowed, and for a moment, everything else faded. "Chloe," he called out, his face lighting up, as if the sheer sight of me chased away the shadows. It brought both relief and a flutter of something more, a reminder of the hope we hadn't yet lost. "Hey," I replied, my voice catching as I stepped closer, recognizing the familiar warmth that anchored me as his eyes found mine. But as I approached, an unsettling thrum reverberated in my chest. Before I could speak, he glanced past me, confusion flickering across his brow. "Did you see the janitor?" he asked, his voice just above the chatter. "No," I stammered. "Why? Just before the alarm went off, I saw him. It was kind of strange. He was acting like he was in a hurry, pushing through the crowd." He shook his head, the lines of worry deepening. "And now he's gone." I felt my stomach drop. "Gone?" Marcus nodded. "He disappeared. It's not like him to just leave like that during a drill." There was an edge of concern in his voice, one I recognized too well. My mind raced back to that moment, how the janitor held something in his hands, how he'd looked at me, as if he held answers to questions I hadn't even thought to ask. "Maybe it's nothing," I said, trying to steady my voice in the face of uncertainty swirling between us. "Or maybe it's something." His gaze locked onto mine, and I couldn't help but shiver at the depth of his concern. Before I could delve deeper, the school intercom crackled to life, slicing through our conversation. "Attention, students. We have an urgent announcement concerning the safety drill. Please report to the auditorium for a brief discussion on safety protocols. Thank you for your cooperation." I exchanged a glance with Marcus, a shared flicker of dread passing between us. The tension in the air crackled, and the earlier hope began to shift, tilting towards something darker. "Let's go," I said quietly, heart pounding as we joined the throng of students, the unfolding mystery lurking like a storm on the horizon. With every step, I felt the fragile threads that held our lives together fray further, the envelope still echoing in the back of my mind like a whispered secret. What lay ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but one thing was clear: whatever revelation awaited us, I knew we had no choice but to face it together. As the crowd surged toward the auditorium, the din of anxious chatter pulsed around us, weaving a symphony of fears that echoed my own heart. Ella remained close, caught up in her excitement. but I felt woven into something darker, the shadow of the janitor's hurry clinging to me like a heavy cloak. I exchanged a glance with Marcus, whose brows knitted in thought. His usual warmth replaced with a simmer of concern. The auditorium loomed ahead, its doors reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to the sunlight that had greeted us just moments before. A wave of unease washed over me as we filed inside, the atmosphere thickening with anticipation. Rows of students settled into seats, a buzz of speculation bubbling, but in my chest, anxiety twisted tighter. The principal stepped onto the stage, a figure of authority who usually projected calm and control. Today, however, the edges of his demeanor were frayed, and his eyes flickered nervously as he glanced at a stack of papers in hand. My heart sank. This was more serious than I'd wanted to believe. "Thank you for your attention," he began, his voice shaky. "As you know, today's fire drill was unplanned. We regret the confusion it may have caused, especially with the unexpected behaviors reported." A murmur swept through the audience, a collection of anxious glances exchanged among peers, and my breath caught in my throat. "Most importantly," he continued, "we want to address safety protocols both for fire drills and for your general welfare on campus." With each word, I felt a chill creep into my bones. The connection to that lone janitor felt stronger than ever. Whispering warnings only I seemed to understand. Suddenly, the principal's voice broke, punctuated by a breath that caught. "It's come to our attention that during the drill, a student was recorded in a hallway, appearing to interact with members of our staff. Under current circumstances, we deem it necessary to locate this student." There was a pause, palpable and tense, my heart pounding louder. A wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd, but my attention narrowed down to Marcus' troubled face. "Did he mean the janitor?" I whispered, panic rising as the implications unfolded. "I think so," he murmured back, his voice low, urgent. "This isn't good." Chloe. I leaned back, the weight of his words squashing the flicker of hope that had surged just moments before. This wasn't a drill. Something vital had plummeted into an uncertain abyss. Why would they need to locate him? I questioned, but I already knew. The sense of urgency shrouding the man with the envelope suggested more than simple curiosity regarding the drill. The principal continued, "We understand the implications of such an event. Please remain aware and report any unusual behavior." And my thoughts spiraled into a chaotic frenzy. What had he seen? And more importantly, had his presence there been a mere coincidence? Or was there significance woven through the fabric of that moment? The assembly was dismissed, and my mind whirled as we filed out, each student grappling with their own fears. Ella was all brightness, oblivious to the heavy questions pressing down upon us. But Marcus' concern loomed like a shadow. "Chloe, we need to find out what happened," he urged as we stepped back into the sprawling halls, the echoes of our surroundings matching the rapid beat of my heart. But before I could respond, the hall was stirred into chaos as a teacher rushed by, shouting for assistance. "We need everyone to stay calm. A lockdown has been initiated." Panic surged, students shuffled, and the walls began to envelop us like a cage. "Stay together," Marcus instructed, but the crowd split, generating an unsettling current of fear. I grabbed hold of Ella's arm, pulling her close, though she seemed lost in the chaotic surge. "Marcus," I called, chasing after him as he moved through the throng, searching for answers. "What do we do?" "We need to find that janitor," he said, determination etched across his face. "He might know something. If he was acting strangely, it has to mean he saw something. We can't let this unravel any further." His urgency mirrored my own, a desperation to illuminate the shadows that loomed over us. But what if the janitor didn't wish to be found? What if we dragged ourselves deeper into something we weren't meant to understand? The fears churned within me, but the glimmer of hope persisted, a hope that perhaps he could unravel the tangled threads of uncertainty that had gripped my heart. Just then, a loud slam echoed down the hall, making us both jump. Through the sudden silence, a bright light flashed across the dim corridor, catching my breath. A figure darted through the doorway in unsettling shadow, moving too quickly, too erratically. My heart raced as I recognized the fleeting outline of the janitor's uniform. "Marcus, look," I shouted, pointing as the figure stumbled into the darkened hallway. "That's him. Let's go," he urged, taking off at a jog, and without a second thought, I followed. Each step felt like a leap into the unknown, adrenaline surging as I propelled myself forward, past the chaos and fear. Yet as we rounded the corner, searching for him amidst the uncertainty, my mind spiraled with unanswered questions. What lay ahead? What revelation awaited us? And as we raced deeper into the shadowed halls, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change more than just for us, but for the school, for the community, and perhaps for who we were becoming. I felt as if we were on the brink of something monumental, and the only choice was to plunge forward into the darkness together. The echo of our footsteps bounced off the cold, tiled floor, a stark reminder of the stillness that enveloped every corner of the building. My heart hammered against my ribs, a percussion to the panic that thrummed in the air. Marcus led the way, determination etched across his features, while I struggled to keep pace, caught between the surge of hope and the weight of dread that snaked through my gut. Where did he go? I gasped, glancing down the shadowy corridor, filled with empty lockers that felt almost ominous in their silence. Do you think he's okay? Whatever's happened, he knows something, Marcus replied, eyes scanning our surroundings. We need to catch up with him, fast. Again, a slamming door echoed behind us, making us jump once more. My instincts screamed to turn back. The atmosphere felt charged with something volatile. But the thought of losing the janitor, losing our chance at answers, kept me grounded. Just then, a flicker of movement caught my eye. Over there. I pointed to a narrow doorway ajar at the end of the hall, faint light streaming out. Without hesitation, we hurried toward it, hearts racing, the fears behind us momentarily forgotten. Pushing the door open, we stumbled into a small, dimly lit room stacked high with old furniture and dusty equipment. An array of discarded science projects and broken chairs lay forgotten, but it was the figure crouched in the corner that sent adrenaline slicing through my veins. Sir, Marcus called, stepping forward. The man looked up, and even in the low light, I recognized his face, the janitor, his expression drawn and weary, eyes darting around as if he were a cornered animal. What do you want? He croaked, voice laced with panic. He was gripping a crumpled piece of paper like it was a lifeline. That we want to help you, I shouted, instinctively moving closer, despite the apprehension that thrummed in the air. What happened during the drill? Why were you in the hallway? He shook his head, sweat glistening on his forehead, fear etched into every line of his face. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. You need to leave. He glanced back toward the door, anxiety spilling into his voice. If they find you, who? I pressed, feeling a knot of urgent dread tightening. What's going on? The janitor hesitated, lips pressed together, and in that moment, doubt flickered through my mind. Maybe he was caught up in something he didn't know how to explain. Or perhaps he was just scared as we were. Handing him a calm smile, I took a tentative step closer. Please, we want to understand. Just tell us what you saw. A heavy silence enveloped us, a charged tension that felt as thick as the dust settling around us. Then he took a deep breath, lowering his voice until it was almost a whisper. I saw someone in the hallway, someone they were hiding. His gaze darted, as if assessing whether they were already closing in on us. It's bigger than the school. It's about everything that's happening everywhere. Everything in me shivered, my heart pounding louder as I stood on that precipice of fear and curiosity. What do you mean? Bigger than the school? What's happening? People are being watched, monitored, he murmured, eyes wide and terrified. Not just students, but teachers too. I've seen things, conversations, plans. He hesitated again, then tore the paper from his grip and tossed it onto the ground, letting it flutter like an autumn leaf. They want to keep it hidden. They'll do anything to maintain control. Just as I bent down to pick up the crumpled note, shrouded in uncertainty of what it might reveal, we heard an unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps slamming against the floor outside the room. My stomach dropped as realization flickered in my mind. They're here, the janitor hissed, eyes wide with terror. You need to go. Now wait. I yelled, but it was too late. The door flew open, and two faculty members, faces grim and hard, stood framed in the doorway, scanning the room. Get back, one of them shouted, shoving past us. You're not supposed to be here. Everything went cold, and I instinctively grabbed Marcus by the arm. Panic surged as I searched for an escape route in the cramped space, but there was none. My heart thundered louder, the shadows closing in as the two teachers advanced. "Chloe, this way," I heard Marcus yell, and I spun on my heels, darting back the way we had come, praying desperately ahead for an exit, for a thread of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. "Stop!" One of the faculty members barked, the command echoing through the room, a chilling finality that sent a shiver racing down my spine. With every ounce of strength, I ran, a surge of fear and adrenaline propelling my feet forward. Behind us, I heard the sound of footsteps closing in, and just as I cleared the doorway, a searing thought struck me. What if we not only lost our chance at answers, but also plunged further into a darkness we weren't ready to confront? And just as we rounded the corner towards safety, Marcus stumbled, nearly falling, his face twisted in horror. "Chloe, you have to go without me," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper, the urgency clawing at my insides. "Absolutely not," I shouted, spinning to face him, heart racing. "I'm not leaving you." Desperation surged through me, but before I could pull him back into safety, the two faculty members rounded the corner, their expressions stark with authority. And in that moment, as our eyes met, I understood this was only the beginning of a fight we had to make together or risk losing everything. But before I could reach out, the chaos gripped us once again, and the world slipped into confusion as Marcus was pulled away into the throng. I stood frozen, eyes wide in horror, realizing I had lost him, a piece of my heart missing, leaving me alone amidst the uncertainty. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously, giving the hallway around me a sickly hue that matched the unease coiling in my stomach. I stood frozen in place, my breath caught in an icy grip. Marcus was gone. The weight of that realization crashed against me like a wave of despair. "Chloe," a voice shouted, piercing the fog of confusion. The teachers advanced, but I couldn't tear my gaze from the spot where Marcus had stood. Where had they taken him? Was he safe? Did he need me? I could hear the world around me, muffled and distant. The heavy thud of my heart overshadowed everything else. "Chloe." It was Marcus' voice again, and this time it trembled, a sound filled with desperation. I turned back just in time to see him being pulled down another corridor, struggling against the grip of one of the faculty members. "Let him go," I cried out, instinctually taking a step forward. The teachers shot me a warning glare. The indifference on their faces shattered my courage. I halted, torn between the urge to fight and the instinct to protect myself. "Leave him alone," I shouted again, desperation lacing every syllable. But my voice felt small, drowned out by the impending storm of confusion and fear engulfing me. "Chloe," Marcus' voice broke through the chaos, steadying me just enough to realize that my legs could move. "Run, don't you dare say that," I screamed, realizing my hands were clenched into fists, my nails digging sharply into my palms. I was failing him, in a frantic moment of rebellion. I pushed past the two teachers, who seemed taken aback by my audacity. But that surprise morphed into aggression as one of them lunged at me. I ducked low, narrowly avoiding their grasp, heart racing as I sprinted toward Marcus. Time moved in slow motion. Every footfall felt like a heartbeat, pulsing dread through my veins. But as I rounded the corner, my heart plummeted. The school exit loomed before me, yet a wall of darkness filled with forbidding figures closed in from all sides, waiting to ensnare my friend. I skidded to a halt, feeling the icy grip of hopelessness threatening to shatter my resolve completely. In that moment of hesitation, a soft touch grazed my arm. I turned, startled to find the janitor standing close, his presence a flicker of warmth against the cold dread that enveloped me. "You're not alone. Find strength in the shadows," he whispered urgently, his voice strained but sincere. "What do you mean?" I whispered back, torn between gratitude for his presence and the urgency that crackled in the air. I needed answers, not riddles. Before he could respond, another voice echoed down the hall, deep and commanding, submerging us in anxiety. "You're making a mistake." I looked up to see a figure stride toward us. It was a woman with an air of authority, her expression a mix of determination and resignation. "We must keep this contained. The school needs to maintain order." "You cannot intervene," she said, directed more toward the janitor than me. "Contain what?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "What's happening? You want silence us?" The janitor nodded toward the exit. "Go, run. Find Marcus. They can't take you both. With those fervent words, he placed a hand on my shoulder, warming the cold knots of panic coiling in my chest. Please. My voice was softer now, the momentum of desperation morphed to pleading. Help him. I need to know he's okay. Do you trust me? He asked, his eyes piercing deep into mine. There was something that carried weight in his Ghazean understanding that felt electric between us that I nodded, though doubt simmered beneath the surface. Yes, but go. He insisted, urgency overtaking the softness. And in that moment, I understood that he believed in my drive, in my need to find Marcus. That gave me the flicker of hope I desperately needed. That I spun on my heels and ran, the energy of the janitor's encouragement propelling me forward. I had to find him, even if it meant leaping into the unknown depths of that encroaching darkness. My legs strained beneath me, pounding against the tiled floor, the world blurring as I focused on one thing: Marcus. That I rounded corners, adrenaline coursing through my veins, pushing me forward despite the uncertainty. I shouted his name, my voice echoing back to me as if taunting my desperation. Just as I approached another intersection, a shadow flickered in my periphery. I hesitated, feeling my heart leap. It looked like Marcus. Chloe, he cried, a mix of relief and fear mingling in his voice. Marcus. I gasped, racing toward him, only to freeze as I caught sight of the figure looming behind him. A tall man, face obscured in shadows, held Marcus's arm firmly. There was no escape. Let him go, I yelled, the weight of impending dread crashing down, just as a deafening crash echoed behind me. Panic pulsed through the air, and I felt a shift, realization dawning as the uncertainty tightened its grip. Suddenly Marcus turned his head, locking eyes with me. A glimmer of something unreadable there, a warning, perhaps, or an invitation for something beyond comprehension. And in that heartbeat, everything fractured as the full force of what lay ahead settled like concrete over my heart, the stakes rising painfully high. There was something more to lose, more than just a friendship teetering on the brink. As I called out his name again, the walls groaned with tension, and darkness cloaked us both, leaving me in a swirling vortex where the truth remained just out of reach, fading into shadows that threatened to swallow our every hope. The air was thick with uncertainty and fear as I bolted down the corridor, each echoing footstep a reminder of what I was about to lose. I could barely comprehend the madness surrounding us, the authority figures lurking ominously, the whispers of treachery, and the weight of unsaid truths hanging heavy in the shadows. But at that moment, all that mattered was Marcus. Chloe. His voice rang out again. My name was barely more than a gasp, yet it was infused with a desperate hope that pulled me forward through the chaos. Run, he pleaded, urgency pouring from him as he faced down the looming shadow at his back. No. The word erupted from my throat, fierce and unyielding. Every heartbeat propelled me closer, the visceral need to protect him igniting something long buried within me. In that moment, I wasn't just a girl fighting her way through the storm of disbelief that was my friend, my lifeline, in danger of slipping away. Adrenaline surged through my veins, and just as I surged forward, one of the shadows, an imposing figure clad in authority, moved to intercept me, blocking my path like a wall. Stop! You shouldn't be here, he barked, his voice laced with authority. That I skidded to a halt, eyes burning with desperation, struggling against the instinct to retreat. You don't understand. I have to get to him, I pleaded, my voice trembling as I pointed toward Marcus, who was struggling against the grip of the stranger, fear flickering in his eyes, but the figure remained stoic, unwavering in the face of my anguish. Behind him, I could see their true intent, the uncertainty that laced the air, the danger pulsating in the shadows. They were attempting to suffocate the truth, to keep control, to silence any spark that threatened to illuminate their deceit. Chloe, Marcus shouted again, his voice echoing with urgency, mingling with panic and something that felt like anguish. They'll hurt you. Please, just turn back. In that moment, anger ignited my resolve. I wouldn't let them diminish us, wouldn't let fear dictate the narrative that was unfolding. Molding courage from the formless shadows around me, I pushed past the authority figure, darting through a narrow gap and racing toward Marcus. The sudden surge of adrenaline surged as I felt the walls sharply closing in around me, but a flicker of hope ignited deep inside my chest. Chloe, no. That voice, the urgency rang out again, but it lit a fire within me. I couldn't abandon him, not when his fear was so palpable, so real. There was no way I'd run from danger alone. With determined strides, I threw myself toward Marcus, my breath hitching between determination and sheer terror, arms reaching out for him as I felt the pressing weight of urgency from the looming shadows. Just as I stepped closer, the gravity of our situation electrified the air between us. Hold on, I yelled, desperation spilling from me, grasping for his hand that seemed so far away now. But as that figure turned, a flash of recognition passed through their eyes, a moment that startled me into focus. They were known to me, a familiar face disguised in harsh authority, mixed with intentions I still struggled to decipher. Let him go, I screamed again, as the air crackled with tension, feeling the shadows shift around me. In that ignition of bravery, I found clarity. This wasn't just about Marcus. It was about everything we stood for, about exposing the hidden truths that lured in the darkness of ignorance. Chloe, don't, Marcus shouted. The urgency in his voice drew me back into crippled reality. Just as panic surged through my veins, the door flung wide open, and the janitor burst through, a whirlwind of hope and chaos converging. Get away from them. His voice erupted with authority that commanded attention even amid the escalating confusion. The man shifted his focus to me, that knowing glint in his eyes sparking unexpected courage. Take them. Without thinking, I lunged towards Marcus, and he instantly seized my Hondan electric connection, reaffirming that we were not in this fight alone. The janitor pivoted toward the figures converging on us, a strange confidence threading through his resolve. There's more to this than you understand, he fervently declared, the paper crinkling in his grasp, its contents still veiled in mystery. You need to understand the danger lurking behind the institution's facade. This is bigger than all of us. I felt a wave of disbelief wash over me. Was he addressing the faculty still positioned in the doorway? The very people responsible for keeping us safe? But as I watched the expression on the faces in the shadows fade into uncertainty, something strange happened. The sense of urgency that rippled through the room began to transform, morphing from fear into something that felt like a revolution was brewing. Take your hands off him, I yelled as Marcus squeezed my hand tighter. But the grip on his arm loosened just enough, and that moment of clarity crackled where one fleeting choice shifted the tide of our fate. Time suspended as the strands of connection began weaving together. The faculty faltered, revealing a gap where we could slip through toward safety. In the blink of an eye, the tension erupted, my instincts kicked in, and we bolted down the corridor, the breathing space behind us now a cacophony of confusion. The two shadows stood still, hesitating, moments shifting like piles of sand, unsure of which way the tide would pull them. As we raced forward, a smattering of laughter erupted behind us, the familiar joy, tinged with something darker, smoke trailing in its wake. We dashed through that door, emerging into the sunlight, and the cool breeze set me in a moment of calm. But as I turned, gripping Marcus' hand tightly, an unexpected chill ran down my spine. Everything settled into chaos. Time was running out as we began assessing our surroundings. The world may have shifted, but the insidious truth loomed just beneath the surface, and I knew that we were still tethered to the darkness that pursued us. Where can we go? I gasped, still filled with fear that seemed palpable in the air. His eyes met mine, brimming with the weight of uncertainty that lingered between us. Anywhere but here, he murmured, pulling me toward the edge of the parking lot, where shadows learned to merge with the sunlight. And just as we turned, our hearts racing with renewed resolve, there it stood, looming in the distance, a deeper secret waiting to unravel just outside the doors of this institution, one that connected us to everything since the first time my heart had broken. Wait. The words caught in my throat as Mr. Bennett the janitor came running up behind us, his expression etched with urgency. You need to see this. Against the rise of unease, I took a step forward, encouraged through the purpose ignited in my heart. The very weight of truth hummed like electricity beneath the surface, and despite the lingering shadows, I felt bold that in that powerful moment, hands united in defiance, hope emerged amidst fear. Together, we could infuse light into the darkness. Someone had to step forward and embrace what lay ahead. Let's uncover this together, I said, summoning all the courage entwined within. And as we backed away from the storm behind us, I felt a flicker of certainty pulse through me, a deeper understanding of what resilience had come to mean. With that final, unwavering resolution, I led Marcus and the janitor into the uncertainty beyond the walls of our schooling, plunging into the heart of a mystery that was only beginning to unfold. A communion forged from courage that triumphed over fear, a melody of hope that beckoned and thrummed, revealing that forgiveness and redemption often shimmered out of the shadows. And as we took our first step forward, one thought lingered profoundly in my heart. In the fiercest moment of chaos, we were not defined by our fears or failures, but by the unyielding light we chose to carry into the unknown. Perhaps this wasn't the end after all. It was just the beginning of discovering within ourselves the resilience to rise from the ashes, to seek out those hidden truths, and to embrace the power that comes from understanding the intricate dance of light and shadow that shapes our lives. With every heartbeat, I realized we were becoming more than who we had been and stepping into the beautiful potential of becoming who we were meant to be.